Scaramouche's redesign caught a lot of travelers by surprise, and while most players seem to like this new version better than the original one, at least according to those of you who voted in my poll, thanks for that by the way, there are still some people who would rather have the purple version. But despite your aesthetic preferences, today I'm here to argue that, from a lore and storytelling standpoint, this redesign was very much needed. All of the outfits and designs we have seen so far tell a clear story in chronological order, and to understand why, we first need to take a look at the outfit we see a newly created Scaramouche wearing in his memories. In this phase of his life, Scaramouche had a predominantly white color scheme. In Japanese culture, as in many others around the world, the color white is associated with physical and spiritual purity. As a newly created puppet, Scaramouche was a blank slate. He was pure not in a moral sense, since he had no reference points for a moral compass, but he had yet to experience the ruthlessness of the world or the unfairness of having been deprived of a heart. He still viewed everything through the eyes of a child, and that purity, though tested, lasted through his two first betrayals, which is exactly why Scaramouche found refuge in the company of another who saw things through the same lens, a child. In addition to the white, there is also a lot of lilac. Purple, in its many shades, has historically been associated with royalty, due to the dyeing process being very expensive. In Japan, too, it's associated with nobility and strength. Other than being an obvious nod towards Electro, it's also a reminder of Raiden A's status as the highest powered Inazuma. As a creation, Scaramouche wears his creator's colors. There is also another purple element in this design, this time in a darker shade, his veil. The first shot we see of this young Scaramouche has him sitting in front of A as she holds the strings. By standing behind and over him, Raiden inevitably casts a shadow over a puppet, one that is not only real but also metaphorical. Though the Electro Arca never meant to have Scaramouche take on the role currently occupied by the Raiden Shogun, from his perspective he was robbed of his birthright, the noses. Without it, he has no sense of identity. He can never be free from the shadows cast by his mother. He will never be his own person, but rather the failed product of a god. The veil is both a visual representation of this metaphor and a parallel between him and A, since the latter used to be Makoto's Kagemusha, her shadow warrior. Last but not least, Scaramouche is seen wearing a necklace made out of red rope. In Japan, there is the concept of the red rope of fate, which is said to tie soulmates together. So, in a way, this necklace may represent his yearning for human connections. However, it is also said to ward off evil spirits, and the color red itself represents power and protection. In this case, it might have one additional meaning: control. This necklace might represent his puppet's strings, from which he never fully managed to extricate himself, despite setting off on his own journey. Attached to the necklace is a single feather, which may represent the lightness associated with childhood. He may not have had a light heart, but his mind had yet to be weighed down. Such is the clothing that the vagrant of Inazuma dons, while his empty chest, that by all rights should have housed a heart, gets broken not once, not twice, but thrice. While his childlike nature may have endured the first two trials set for him, the death of his young friend was the straw that broke the camel's back. And thus, a new version of Scaramouche was born. The design we've known for so long contrasts sharply with his previous garments. What was before almost purely white has now been nearly entirely replaced by black. Although also the color of elegance, black is seen as the color of misfortune. And how very unfortunate his life has been. The purple accents remain because, although he has now chosen to turn on his creator, Scaramouche's identity is still very much linked to hers. There is also a lot more red now, though rather than symbolizing his control over him and his need for connection, it may now be the armor he chooses to hide behind. Scaramouche feels weak. What other reason could his own mother have rejected him for if not for his weakness? So he decides to look strong, to wear the color of power, to strive for control for himself, until the day comes when he is finally able to claim true strength, to claim the noses. He still wears a veil, although this one is different. While the other covered his head as though cast by another, this one is attached to his own hat. This may just be me reading too much into the symbolism here, but this might be a representation of the fact that he is now the one casting a shadow over himself. A never harbored any ill intent towards him. The shadow currently clouding his judgment is of his own making, stemming from his own feelings of inadequacy, and his efforts paid off. In the end, he got the heart he so desired, his noses. He finally experienced unconditional love from Apasia and was sure to receive much more from his would-be followers. All the wishes he had placed on a pedestal long ago were finally leveled with him. Who cares if he had to put himself in another shadow once more to reach them? He had to willingly tether himself to his puppet string once more, but what of it? He was a god. And then he was falling. But he was spared by Nahida, one who looks like a child and represents the innocence of wisdom and knowledge in its purest form, who represents the childlike wonder Scaramouche had been robbed of. It's at this point that a new Scaramouche is born, one we have yet to meet, but one we already know so much about from his design alone. We see the return of the color white, as Nahida guides his gaze, shifting the lens through which he views the world, as he learns to see the good in people once more, and maybe, just maybe, even to trust. For the first time, the purple disappears and is replaced by many shades of blue, which represent stability, security, and dignity. With it, Scaramouche will begin to learn how to carve out an identity for himself, one that is shaped, in part, by others, but never created by them. Even his robes, now almost entirely gone, are blue. He will no longer be bound. The veil is also gone for the first time, as Scaramouche dares to step outside of the shadows cast by his mother in his own mind and into the sun. But the most important element of this new design is firmly placed upon where his heart should be. Ada let him go after he awakened, because she believed she was giving him the gift of freedom. But in her mercy, Scaramouche found only a curse. Now, at last, the gift of freedom is his to take in the form of an animal vision. Attached to it is his feather, because, having finally let go of his burdens, he can finally soar. What do you think? Personally, I think the concept artists have really outdone themselves with Scaramouche. Not only does he have a very recognizable silhouette, consistent across all designs, but they also succeeded in telling a story without the need for cumbersome words. Anyway, those are just my 2 cents, but I hope you enjoyed. My name is Blue, and I'll see you again soon. Safe journey, travelers.